What's going on, everybody? I'm back with another video. This video is going to be looking at the Champions League match between Real Madrid and PSG in the knockout rounds of the Champions League. Before we get into the tactics behind how PSG beat Real Madrid, check out both my books. They're online on Amazon and there's links in the description below. Also, be sure to check out Keyframe. It's how I'm making this video, and let's get right into the tactics behind the match. So Real Madrid were under quite a lot of pressure for most of the match, which led to them using their first phase of build-up quite often and more than the other thirds of the field when they were in possession of the ball. So in their build-up phase, they went with a 4-3-3, seeing Casemiro as the single pivot in the holding midfield position, but oftentimes Toni Kroos and Luka Modric would drop deeper outside of their central defenders, occupying the wide area, which led to some interesting dynamics in possession and often created inefficiency trying to break down the PSG defensive organization. Then we also have Benzema dropping deeper for then Asensio and then Vinicius Jr. to run in behind and take advantage of the man orientation of PSG. So PSG went with a very man-oriented approach in their defensive phase, as we see here, with a narrow pressing from out to in, then followed by a bank of four, more so man-oriented to the midfield of Real Madrid and giving them close access to the fullbacks, making it very hard for Real Madrid to play out and into the wide area. Then through numerical equality at the back and jumping central defenders, we have the ability for PSG to then use man orientation in their last line, or Marco Verratti dropping deeper to then mark Modric, and again using man orientation, force Real Madrid to play long and force the ball in behind. Real Madrid then went with a 4-3-3 higher up the field with dual width, using their fullbacks in a more narrow position and allowing their wide wingers to then occupy full width in their early stages of build-up. They went with an asymmetric midfield three, with Toni Kroos and Casemiro dropping deeper, allowing Modric to play as a more number 10 role. Benzema was the lone striker and typically occupied the last line of defense before dropping in to try and get the ball. Now later in the game, we see PSG use a 4-3-3 after Neymar came onto the field. And although the defensive work rate wasn't high from these players, Real Madrid weren't able to capitalize and use their first line of build-up to then break the first line of pressure and cause a ripple effect down the field. And we'll notice a trend from Real Madrid not having the ability to occupy these dangerous spaces between the lines against the PSG defense, which often was one of the main reasons why Real Madrid weren't able to generate a lot of concrete chances in possession, because these spaces between the lines weren't occupied by the Real Madrid players, as we'll see in later pictures. Here is the best job they do, with Luka Modric playing higher up the field, but without any direct access or strong connections or concepts to get the ball into a player like Luka Modric higher up the field. Now, in the second half especially, before Neymar came on, we can see the strong man orientation that PSG use against Real Madrid when Real Madrid are looking to play from the back. And even later in the game, it just became more and more defined with these concepts of man orientation all across the field. And as we see, defending with numerical equality at the back in a 3v3 situation, leaving a lot of space in behind, allowed PSG to play higher up the field and limit the use of a free man. Now, Courtois was the only man advantage Real Madrid were able to generate. But as we know, Courtois isn't actively involved in the build-up of Real Madrid, and the central defenders pretty much do it all. So there was almost no numerical superiority for Real Madrid in possession, and when PSG played much higher up the field, it became very hard for Real Madrid to break PSG down and exploit and gain superiority going forward. Now, a lot of times in possession, the Real Madrid structure would look as we see it here. So we have Modric dropping deeper, Casemiro deeper, and Toni Kroos all deeper outside of the block of PSG and in front of their central defenders on the ball. So the offensive organization of Real Madrid in this moment is pretty awful, with both their fullbacks and wingers pretty much in the wide area, and then Benzema creating height through the structure. So the most dangerous pieces of the field between the lines, where you really affect the other team, isn't being occupied, and PSG drop another player into their back five, their wing backs come deeper, and they just are happy to sit in a 5-4-1. And from here, the only hope for Real Madrid was the wingers running in behind to try and access space because of the high line of PSG, but with so many players out and around block of PSG, there was really very little to offer in the offensive phase for Real Madrid, especially higher up the field and after their initial build-up. Now, PSG had some pretty promising build-ups with their back three. They went with their wingbacks holding the full width of the field, allowing players like Messi and Mbappe to play a bit more narrow, and when Neymar came on as well, play more between the lines and in dangerous areas. So we had our holding midfielder and Marco Verratti as a versatile midfielder who could also come deeper alongside the single pivot and create a double pivot, but having Verratti higher up the field gave him closer access to transitions and allowed him to win the ball back higher up the field. Also allowed him to overload the space between the lines and give Real Madrid more trouble. So by doing this, it was able to then allow Mbappe to stay higher in a more of a pinning role, as well as fan out into a wider area to then create isolation against defenders. But these overloads in advanced positions often force the Real Madrid shape to become very narrow, and as we see in their 4-1-4-1 here, Luka Modric jumping a bit higher and creating vertical partnerships with Benzema. And at times, Real Madrid's shape could become overstretched as we see it here because of their man orientation and just how their structure matched up against PSG. So we see 4-5-1 in full effect for Real Madrid, and vice versa for PSG. We see their back three, their single pivot, and now we see the flexibility from this PSG side with now using dual width with Mbappe fanning out, leaving more space for a midfield three and a player like Lionel Messi to then occupy a higher role and create an overload in this right half space to work off of Di Maria and exploit the space left by Real Madrid's man-oriented defense. Now finally, probably the most clear picture throughout the match with how PSG build from the back, using their back five and their wing backs and then targeting space between the lines, and how they do that using pinning of Di Maria and Mbappe between two defenders of Real Madrid in their last line of defense. So their two defenders pin the back four of Real Madrid, and now Messi and Verratti can go higher up the field, right in behind the blind side of the midfielders, to then exploit the space in behind and between the lines that's being overemphasized by the players pinning higher up the field and being occupied by the midfielders of PSG, just positioning off the shoulder of the midfielders of Real Madrid. So this is a really clear concept on how the structure of PSG was used to then carry out their principles and goals in possession. And that's where we're going to wrap up the analysis. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.